Hello, I'm Venita Blackburn, Assistant Professor of Fiction and Thesis Committee Chair for Alex Habib. I read a variety of literature as a scholar of the craft. Texts that are not traditionally fiction, nonfiction, or poetry, right? It is important for my health as a writer, as a contemporary artist, to investigate what is happening in the world of text. So I come to Alex's work with that kind of investigator perspective, and I find myself in landscapes that are ancient and modern. It is thrilling to see how our civilization is evolving through unprecedented ability to exchange ideas and trends, to modify our language with new symbols and innovations minute to minute. And Alex's project is, in a word, ambitious. He is creating new religions, inventing the architecture of a whole civilization through philosophy, theology, and of course, a love story. The characters are mythical, and like all the gods, they are incredibly human, grotesque, and glorious. In our modern era, where real people, are assigned extraordinary personas and have to exist as representations of our best selves or our ideal selves, and if they fail to do so, as they almost always will, the repercussions are devastating. Conspiracies are born, then beaten to death. Leaders are praised, then struck down as pariahs. However, when these ordinary people with an extraordinary luster manage to lift off from the muck of common celebrity culture, they reach deification and can become the root of whole faiths. Alex's work investigates that point of fluctuation between worship and admiration, how we engineer gods from plain old people. And the work does so in language that is eloquent, visceral, lush, epic, and stunning. With that, I introduce you to Alex Habib, reading from his thesis, Son of the Sky.
There are so many people who I could thank for my being here tonight. But for the sake of brevity, friends, family, faculty, all those of you who helped me get where I am, you know who you are. But one person I do want to specify, who I can no longer thank in person, is Mr. David Bradley, my third grade teacher, to whom I credit the impetus of my love of reading, and from that the love of writing that brought me here to the creative writing program. The excerpt that I'm reading tonight finds the main character, after several years of isolated wandering, returning to the land in which his people were extinguished. We returned with the winds that herald winter. Taenia's northern forest glimmered in the waxing morning light. Over the frozen underbrush and barren branches stood the cedars, sentinels, evergreen and watchful. Through them, pale lights speckled the snowy underbrush. The howling winds of night had subsided into mist, crystallizing upon the remains of autumn leaves. Beneath the cedar's guard, silhouettes crunched softly upon the frost, the scurrying of animals from burrow to burrow. But within the tranquil air we breathed anticipation. The beasts were cautious of our presence, even more so than the animals. But there was another, one who had come from the north, that had wreaked havoc upon the farming villages and disturbed the forest. The cedars watched as we drew closer in our hunt, eager to witness whether we truly stood among them. Heavy and methodical, we lumbered upright on two legs, breaking the mist against our torso. But we moved not like the beasts of civilization. We brought no axe to fell trees, no maps of structures to build. We wandered as the clouds do, separate from the world of living beings. If the cedars bore recognition, it was only for being the last of our kind. Deeply we breathed the forest vapors, at ease among the familiar woods. We examined the trees and foliage, searching for the knots and scars and rough twisted branches we remembered. But the land seemed more weathered than usual, still pained by the wounds of war. Rovitan's conquest could still be felt. Rusted weapons and the bones of beasts called humans littered the wilds. The roots had overgrown them in the few years past, slowly cleansing the tragedy from the land. But the cedars remembered, their scars the evidence of one species' folly. Eventually we found what we were looking for, an old, gnarled husk of a tree. Long dead, its hollow trunk made an excellent cache. We had long forgotten whatever it was we had stored there, but this was the last cache we had before the land devolved into cities. We wondered if it was money, weapons, or clothing. Perhaps our past self would surprise us with something else. We reached into the hollow, finding nothing but the flaky muck of decay, Twigs stabbed at our palm, likely the remains of a nest long abandoned. Though disappointed, we were not surprised. In the 3 years past, animals would certainly have scavenged our supplies for themselves. We brushed the twigs aside, finding the surface beneath the nest to be remarkably flat. Unnaturally so, in fact. We dug our fingers around the object and wrenched it out of place. Brushing it off, we were met with a single whetstone. We sighed at the gray slab disappointedly, a white-hot cloud spilling from our lips, but nonetheless tucked it into one of the many pockets lining our jacket. We would have preferred a hood to shield our visage from the prying eyes of humans, but the stone was better than nothing. We ran dirty fingers through our matted hair, letting the frigid breeze caress our scalp. Its soothing chill seeped down our spine, tremulously enticing our limbs to action. We needed to do something, anything, to release these burning energies. The furnace of our heart knew no rest, and it was all we could do to not burn from the inside out, consumed by our suppressed spirit. Back to the tracks. Yes, there was work to be done. With a roll of our stiff shoulders, we adjusted the heavy leather coat that hung off our frame, before backtracking a small way to a trail we had discovered some hours earlier. Time had worn us thin, the wildlands having stripped the fat from our body. The skin had become taut over the remaining muscle, and no amount of rest could ebb our weariness. We scooped fresh snow from the ground and shoved it in our mouths, but even that blood of the clouds could not cool our veins. The heat, overwhelming and radiant, would not leave us. Even as the soothing seasons of cold and death caressed the land, the raging heat forbade us follow. We came upon an auspicious tangle of shrubbery. Something large had torn through the underbrush, rampaging through the forest just as it had the farmlands. The apparent size of the creature suggested a bear, but there would be none so far north this time of year. Even then, the movements were too haphazard. A native bear would have left only a minimal imprint upon the land. If our estimations were correct, and in matters such as this they often were, then this animal was unfamiliar with the land, likely having come from the northern plains. The beast's tracks told us the rest. Split hooves had fervently torn up dirt, accompanied by long scrapes between them. It was a large tusked boar. Judging by the distance between the prints, it must have still been adolescent, merely the size of a grizzly. We grimaced as we followed the tracks lightly. The farmers who had hired us had made it out to be some kind of horrible monster, a creature of malice and devastation. We had known it was too good to be true. As the sun approached its zenith, we caught upon the scent of pig flesh. We listened for movement, but the silence bade us approach. We peeked around a tree to see the animal taking refuge against a mighty cedar, shivering as it rested, its coarse back hairs doing little to guard it from the onset of winter. Beneath the thick array of protective branches, it made soft squeals of fear, no doubt terrified at being separated from the pack. But the western migration would have been well underway by now. What hope did this lost child have of finding its way home? We examined the boar in silence until a roar from our stomach tore the quiet asunder. 4 days of subsisting on nothing but snow had left our body impatient, yearning for the pleasure of tooth-torn meat and lifeblood as fatigue slowly encroached. As the pig leapt to its feet, its crusted eyes searching through the mist, we licked our chapped lips and drew closer. The boar picked up on the scent of man-beast and turned about fearfully. We reached for the hilt of our sword. "It's just a child. Give it a chance at least. It deserves that much." "We're hungry. So are they." "Good. Whomever lives may eat the other." "You know that's not what we meant. Try to remember compassion." Reluctantly, we let go of our weapon and made our way within sight of the boar. "You lost?" we asked casually. The animal fixated on us and squealed a threat, bashing its tusks into the dirt. It had no way of knowing that we were not like the farmers that had frightened it from the fields. We were clothed and upright with language. A sword glinted from our hip, prompting the boar to hold its own weapons at the ready. "I know you must be hungry, but the humans need that food for winter." The wild hog burst forward, intent on impaling us. But we dove quickly, and it barely caught us in the ribs with the tusk's outer curve. As it slowed and turned, we leapt to our feet, shouting as we rubbed our side. "Hey! I don't care for them either. But like it or not, the cities have become their territory." We sternly stared the creature down, pointing northwest towards the pack's destination. "The plains are over that way. See if you can't get back to them." The swine charged again, only to slam face first into a dead ash tree as we leapt over its attack. It wobbled in a temporary daze before gathering its senses, digging its forelegs into the frozen dirt and challenging with a guttural cry of aggression that frothed at its lips. Fine. You want to get straight to it? We pulled the longsword from its sheath. The blade was shattered into a jagged edge mere inches above the hilt. This is your last chance to run away. We held it backward like a dagger in our offhand, crouching and ready to pounce. We stared down the impudent beast, taunting. It's mere the cold, piggy. Which would you rather die by? No need to be patronizing. Shut up! We gave it its chance, and we are hungry, and we want to kill, but it does not understand that it's none of our concern. Shut up, all of you. The boar charged again, but had no chance to catch us. Instead, we thrust into its side, sending it crashing into the observing cedar. Snow tumbled loudly in acknowledgment from the rattling branches, melting against the crimson that seeped from the deep cut between its ribs. Me it is, then. We could not help but salivate as the pig righted itself. We gave the jagged blade a quick lick, savoring the bloom of flavor. Oh, you're going to be delicious. The boar was beginning to learn. Instead of charging at us, it and we began to circle one another. When the boar drew close enough, it swung its tusks out wide, a futile attempt to sweep our legs out from under us. We avoided them with ease, slashing the animal's brow in retort. Blinded by blood seeping into its eyes, the swine flew into a thoughtless panic. It threw its whole weight against us, flailing its head unpredictably. We should not torment it like this, end the poor child's suffering. There is no end to suffering. But why must we spawn more? There will be more, regardless. It managed to get several strikes upon our torso before an arm hooked around its ivory, locking it in place. The adolescent squealed desperately, and we, weapon in hand, plunged our other arm down its gullet until our elbow vanished. We wrenched the hand free, empty now but for a thick layer of saliva, and shoved the boar away with a thunderous cry. It began convulsing madly, all sense stripped away. Unable to escape the jagged steel inside it, the boar could only flail in dismay, killing itself faster as it did so. That was cruel. It was efficient. Death will free the young one shortly. We could have gone for the throat. Too much fat in the way. The bleeding would have been drawn out. So this is supposed to be mercy? Don't pretend those human ideas mean anything. They used to. Lies! Have you forgotten our memories? Have you forsaken them? As dark, thick blood spurted from the young one's maw, we moved to lean against a tree. Clutching at our ribs, we could feel the blood pooling between them. None broken, we muttered to ourselves as we pressed upon the sore spots. Cracked, maybe, time will tell. Straightening ourselves fully upright, the pain splintered around our chest. Sephar's corpse, I'm getting old, we groaned. Unlike this one. We looked back at the pig, now still but for the occasional twitch, acrid steam rising from the scarlet moat forming around the body. With that aspect of our being that knew the presence of other life, we could feel its final wheezy breath trickle back out into the sky. We should pay it the proper respects. Empty words were pointless actions. But Sudari always, don't invoke that name. I'm sorry, but please, so we can sleep tonight. Fine. It won't make a difference, but it'll shut you up. We hobbled over and dropped to our knees before the red pool, placing a hand atop the boar's head. We did not know what we were supposed to say. We had never remembered the proper rites of sacrificial prayer. All we could do was apologize and hopefully console ourselves. I am sorry, little one. You did not deserve this. You know nothing of humans' twisted morality. We maintained a gaze with the boar's own vacant eyes, washed of blood by its final tears. Cold, lost, alone, a wretched way to die. I know your anguish, but your suffering is not in vain. Your flesh shall nourish the land and fellow animals. I accept your hatred and Our face contorted with frustration. We could never finish prayers. They were all too empty of meaning. We closed the creature's eyes and grasped its tusks. I'm sorry, but I need to bring evidence of your defeat. We snapped one off at the root with a wet crack that pierced the morning air. The asymmetric corpse looked all the more pathetic for its loss. Actually, I'm also visiting an old friend. I should bring him a gift, we added before snapping off the other. With the formalities out of the way, it was time to eat. We reached down to our scabbard only to remember where we had left the broken blade. With a grimace, we shrugged off our jacket and unslung a pale bundle of cloth from our back. The hammock unspooled to reveal the short sword it was bound around. Hungrily, we drew the cracked blade, setting it upon the first wound we had struck, the point resting cleanly between two ribs. We pushed the weapon down until hilt met meat before cleaving through the underbelly. The flesh burst with a snap like melon rind, its crimson juices dribbling forth. Putrid vapors billowed as insides became outsides, sliced organs spilling their contents for all the forest to smell. Spreading the skin aside, we crouched down in the muck and plunged our left arm deep into the chasm. We were in up to the shoulder when we finally gripped the handle, pulling it out with a slick, sticky squelch. With experience such that there was no need to think, we cleansed the body of foul parts that might taint the meat, leaving them scattered for the scavengers. Soaked with gore, we moved about to collect sticks and other dead, dry shrubbery, piling them nearby and fashioning a spit from the longer ones. With a sliver of flint from our pocket, we managed to spark a small fire. We pushed through the pain as much as we could to get out all the best meat. After securing the strips over the fire, we turned to our hammock strewn across the ground. Our intent had been to rest upon it, but instead found ourselves flopping onto our back in the snow, piling the relieving powder onto our chest. "I'm sorry, Sadari. I never learned how to pray. Baron tried to teach me after you left us, but if I couldn't believe then, how can I now?" As the day waned, various forest dwellers came out to inspect the scene, the scent of human now hidden beneath sweet blood, ultimately sharing in the feast that had been presented to them. They had not appreciated the boar's intrusion, strange as its kind were among these southern lands, and were pleased to see it no longer a threat. Foxes tore at its legs, and carrion birds settled on its head to peck at its snout. Even the rodents came to inspect, occasionally drawing owls to swoop down upon them. Staring at the sky through the dense conifers of the cedar, we tried to remember those formative years, when it was just the three of us. We could see Sadari's gnarled, wrinkly hands, the hands of safety, her voice, raspy and wise, that sang our comfort on those first fearful nights, her embrace, a promise of guidance and love. We yearned to be with her again, to be with all those we had lost. But those were foolish dreams, the wishes of a child who did not know the cruel truth of the world. We strained desperately to let emotion overcome us, to express something of the self we had been before, but nothing. We could not mourn for the dead. To release our burning heart could destroy us, and the world would not allow us that. Time and again, the world had failed to kill us. Or perhaps we had failed to die. We no longer understood a difference. I am going to finish it, Sadari. I had to see it all again. I've almost completed the pilgrimage, and I realized something this time around. I am alone, and I alone can finish this. For all of us, all of them. You would have loved them, Sadari. It was home all over again. I'll try to commune at the wind song. Meet me there, Baron. After that, I have a task waiting for me at Lure. With the capital's name, fragmented thoughts exploded in cacophony, forcing visions of our burning brother. The voices of wind wailed endlessly against each other. We tried to resist their onslaught, but it was a practice in futility. The stench of flesh on fire invaded us, thick as the caustic pitch that had melted through to our brother's bones. We could not help but cry out as we surged upright, thrusting snow into the air and scattering the animals back to their secret nooks and burrows. We tore at our hair maniacally, heaving and wheezing and wailing within ourselves as though each strand were a thought that could cleanse our memory by being ripped away. But the cacophony would not be suppressed, having already seeped into the deepest crevasses of our mind. When the shaking had ebbed, we shuffled over to the fire where the flesh burned, our bodily pains temporarily numbed. We attacked the meat ravenously, tearing strips away with our teeth, chewing only as much as necessary for the juicy flesh to slide down our gullet. Guttural noises escaped us as we savored the rich fat that dribbled warmly through the frost in our beard. There was only the slightest gristle left behind, stripped sinews and hollow bones. We were addressed with a low squawk. Of the animals that had come, only the snow ravens remained, their beady red eyes watching us curiously from atop the boar. Blood dripped from their pale beaks, staining the otherwise immaculate plumage. Ravenously, we met their gaze, snapping another bone for the treat within, stomach moaning with ecstasy. What We stared them down as we slurped the rich marrow. "You want some? You've got plenty over there." "Rot," replied the largest, before yanking at a piece of ear. "Think you're gonna make a meal of me?" The bird turned to the side, displaying its profile in silent retort. "Don't act so haughty." We stood up aggressively, spitting our words. "You smug, greedy cowards." They shuffled about the corpse as we threw scraps of gristle at them, claiming every empty victory. At least their dark-feathered cousins had the sense to keep away. "Come on, try it! Eat me!" We started towards them. The others turned to see us looming over them, their stoic faces considering. Their hollow eyes were blank of judgment, but pierced so deep that none could hide their self away. "Go!" we shouted as we kicked the corpse, ruffling their demeanor. "Get away!" we kept kicking. "Get out of my sight!" Finally the birds took off, weaving through the mist beyond the cedars as we hurled insults after them. We stumbled forward in half-hearted pursuit before our clawing hands absently fell upon the cedar that bore watch upon us. With an anguished sigh, we pressed our face against it, the splits in the bark not unlike the splits in our flesh. "You know what it's like, don't you?" we muttered beneath our breath, flattening a bloody hand against the trunk. "Everything dies, and we are left behind to witness." We lifted our gaze. Aside from the gentle rustling of the wind betwixt its leaves, the cedar was still as stone. We backed away a step, realizing the red print we had so impudently left upon the stoic observer. The silence in the air grew somber as we accepted that there would be no response for us.